Talk, 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 talk. Art of the Zodiac presents Talk, 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 talk. Oh, look, it's recording. This is wonderful. Hello, Jonah Emerson-Bell. How are you today?
Hi, I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm pretending like we weren't just talking for like 5 minutes before this started recording. Maybe 3 minutes. I was thinking about how I would introduce you, and I struggle because there's like so much. You're an artist. You're like about to be like a therapist. You're a wizard. You're an astrologer, a tarot reader. Right? What am I missing?
Radio host, DJ.
Yeah, a radio host, DJ. How do you introduce yourself at parties?
I usually say, "Hey, I'm Jonah."
Okay. But when people ask, like, okay, but what do you do?
Oh, the
Yeah.
10th house question.
Yeah.
I usually say I'm an astrologer
Okay.
because that impresses people. When I tell people I'm a magician, it like makes them feel kind of weird, and then they ask for magic tricks. I don't do magic tricks, right? I think living is a magic trick, but and tarot reader is like a little nebulous.
Yeah.
And I'm not a licensed mental health counselor, so I can't say that I'm a therapist yet. And I think life coach is a terrible term, so I try not to use that one. But I used to introduce myself as a wizard, and I think like that still kind of carries. And that one was like sort of a joke,
Yeah.
that ended up becoming true.
I have my actual like I have one question for this interview, and it's framed around this wizard idea, or this wizard identity, I should say. But before I get to that, I do want to ask, did you do some sort of life coach training? I feel like you did.
I did. I went through a training by this coaching group called Being True to You, which does integration coaching for psychedelic experiences.
That's why I'm in that program.
Oh, nice. Let's talk later. That's awesome. And that I don't see clients through them, but like that gave me a lot of support around developing kind of an identity as a practitioner, and a lot of kind of help around seeing clients and holding space for clients, which was incredibly valuable for like my coaching work, but also for my counseling work as an astrologer and tarot reader. And then I also have done a hypnosis training as a I can't remember what the title is, but that was with Melissa Tears, who's a hypnotist in New York City.
Wow. So I want to say it's funny that you went the coaching program, because you kind of have like, I want to say this in the best word possible. Everyone I know who goes through a coaching program like has this like way of speaking that I really like envy. Like you know, the whole like, I'm feeling, how are you feeling? There must be a word for that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. You know, and I think I don't know what the specific terms for that, but I think that it has a lot to do with kind of developing like emotional intelligence, doing like one's own inner work, kind of, and tuning into ways of communicating that are kind of supportive, right, for the client or like whoever you're talking to, instead of, you know, trying to like give somebody advice or tell them what to do. It's learning how to kind of be with people in their process, so that they can arrive at the solutions that are the most helpful for them, which, you know, as an astrologer, I think is like, that's been incredibly helpful for me, because I think that as astrologers, people come to us and they're like, tell me the answer, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what am I supposed to do with my life? When is my career going to take off? When am I going to find the romance of my dreams, right? And I mean, in the chart, like we can see these things, right? Or we can see kind of like markers and things that signify them. But just like telling somebody what the answer is doesn't allow them the kind of agency and autonomy to develop the resources and the ideas for themselves, which I think is much more helpful. And I think that being able to empower clients through helping them discover their own agency, which like a lot of times in this work, people come to us and they're like, take my agency, tell me what to do. Right. And like, that is not to like say anything kind of negative about any clients, because I do that, right? When I don't know what I'm doing, I'm like, I call my astrologer, I call my tarot reader, I call my psychic. I'm like, yo, tell me what to do, right? And that's natural. And I think that a good practitioner is like, I hear you, and let's help you figure out the course of action that's best for you.
How that alone feels like it's taken like an evolution. Like that feels like advanced knowledge. So maybe I'm going to go back to the original question. We did an IG live well over a year ago, I believe. And I don't know if it was during that conversation, but it was around that time. And if I'm getting this right, you were telling me a little bit about why you wanted to be a therapist. And you said you were thinking really hard. You're like, what profession is an actual wizard? And you're like, therapists. Therapists are wizards, right? Like, do you still agree with that statement? And where are you on the wizard journey?
What an excellent question. And yeah, you nailed it. And I just want to like clarify a little bit. I was like, okay, what I really want to be is a wizard. And what is the job description that is closest, right? Like if I look on LinkedIn, what is the thing that is closest to wizard? And therapist is what I sort of hit on. And I still think that's true, right? You know, I definitely like have some existential crisis about things. I'm like moving into practicum right now and doing community mental health, or I'm about to start doing community mental health, which is awesome. But, you know, there are some systemic frameworks which I find uncomfortable after working for myself for, you know, the past almost 10 years. And so I'm having to adjust to that, which like offends my wizard sensibilities, right? Because I'm like, but I think what I'm coming to, and sort of what I alluded to in my last rant was, right, like I think it's really important not to like that power dynamic, right?
Yeah.
In counseling and therapy, especially in, you know, divination, right? Where like if I'm the wizard, people are coming to me with their like things, expecting me with all of my like magical abilities to solve these problems, which I don't like. That's maybe not helpful in the long run, right? Maybe what's more helpful is a more horizontal relationship with the people that I work with, where I'm helping support them to access their own magic, which that's what's really important or interesting to me, is helping people access their own magic.
When you are imagining this LinkedIn wizard job description, right? Like what are the categories, right? Like what is this job description, and where is the like overlap between wizard and therapist?
Right. Well, I need to say that I've never actually been on LinkedIn, but I do get emails from them constantly, and I've never even made an account. So that's interesting. You know, sorry, can you ask me the question again?
Yes. More simply put, what do wizards and therapists have in common?
Thank you. So I mean, personally, I see therapy as kind of the evolution of, how do I like, maybe like the practical healing arts that go back, you know, to the old days, to the old countries, right, to the old ways.
Yeah.
And I think that the course that the like Western European kind of vein transformed into like a medical model at Freud, right? Who is like, cool, like there is this stuff, right? This like mystical, magical thing that I can't really like put my finger on called the unconscious.
Yeah.
Right. Which is, the like, tell me where the unconscious is, right? Tell me like how to go, right? It's an idea. This
Yeah.
is like a sensation. It's like understanding, right? But to like legitimize that, I think Freud was like, we have to like make it medical and like evidence based. And so I think that, the kind of understanding of the unseen world that, has existed throughout time and place,
Yeah.
in the kind of European, Northern European, Western European vein, got medicalized and has kind of like come down to us as therapy, right? Which, no judgments on any of this. Like there's great things about it, and there's parts that are problematic, but I think that that is a tradition. Like
Yeah.
my mom's a therapist, right? I am like a white person who like white and Jewish, who like descends from Eastern Europe and Northern Europe, and like this is sort of like my tradition, right? Of but like what's important for me is like kind of reclaiming or reimagining or like reconnecting with the like magical elements of it. And like therapy is straight up magic, because the idea of it is like two people sit in a room and they attune their nervous systems together, right? And in that attunement, something magical happens where there's co-regulation, right? Which, like there's studies about this, but like that is straight up magic, is like sitting there and like regulating with somebody or with nature, right? And connecting with our energy fields. And like it doesn't matter what modality people use or
Yeah.
like what you say, as much as it like matters that it's like two energy beings in a room together.
As it's interesting as you are making the transition to being a working therapist and not just an astrologer, do you imagine something I think about a lot is the maybe advantages that people have when they're working unlicensed, in the sense that if people are coming to you and they don't think you're a professional, I think oftentimes they're more willing to like let their guard down or share things that they might feel intimidated to share with someone who is a professional, right? Is that something you think about a lot, and does that sort of inform your transition?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there is an inherent power dynamic, right? And again, I think like a lot of this comes back to power when we're talking about counseling and the mechanics of counseling, right? And there's an inherent power dynamic with a licensed professional who has letters after their name, who has the power to diagnose you,
Yeah.
right? Who has the power to take away your freedom, who has the power, who is a mandated reporter and has the power to take away your children, right? Like that's all really messed up and like really scary. And there's also maybe a lot of history of people in those power positions doing things that are incredibly harmful to people with less power. LGBTQ folks, minority, black and brown people, right? And like it may not be safe to go to a counselor, right? And I can't remember who was telling me this, but I think Lauren Hickman, who I do an astrology podcast with, who's studying to be a social worker. And they were saying that there's a study done in New York that they asked residents, would you rather have the police show up at your door or a social worker? And people chose the police, which like does not speak very highly of social workers, right?
Yeah.
And so I think being a licensed professional like has a lot of benefits to it, but the kind of flip side is that it can be really intimidating for people, right? And if you show up at counseling, and this is my experience, right? Like when I got a therapist, and it took me until I was in therapy school until I was like 40 to like get a therapist, because I could never afford one, didn't have health insurance, traveled a lot, like it never felt accessible. Right. And, I think accessibility is like another big issue around this. But when I finally got a therapist, I was like, sometimes I think about killing myself, right? Like, please don't lock me up, right? Please, like, if it's a problem, I will, like, we can work on this, but like, do not take away my freedom, because sometimes I'm like, what would it be like if I didn't exist, right? And I'm putting that out there, like, not to like activate anybody or trigger anybody, but I think that like it's important to have these conversations, right? Because errant thoughts of like, what would it be like if I wasn't here, is not the same as like having a plan to end one's life, right? And these are like really, one is like, this is part of being alive, in my opinion, and the other one is like, okay, we have an issue here, right? That like this person might need some support around, but taking away somebody's freedom, or calling the police, right, may not be the best course of action. And I think that, like, for me, I had a lot of fear that being in counseling would end up with like me being institutionalized, because like, I also like have a magical practice where I talk to like ancestors and spirits, right? And I told my counselor, like, hey, I talk to these things, do not lock me up, right? This is not a problem.
That's like, you're stumbling upon a topic that I've been thinking about a lot lately. I have some clients that are like diagnosed like bipolar, but I think part of it is like I'm not a doctor at all, and I don't like, when I listen to their stories, it feels like a lot like, in some cases, like magic, right? I'm like, oh, you just have this like blind faith in something, or you like talk to things, right? And I'm not like, and sometimes like I wonder where that like crossover is, right? Because I think I have, like, when clients come to me and they're like, oh yeah, like I talk to voices, I'm like, cool, what do they say? Like, let's dive into that. Like, there's this idea that like I'm okay with that. But the same people, right? I've met people who've, go to therapists and they're automatically like, okay, drugs. Or people who, I've also met people who, maybe have been put on drugs they didn't necessarily need, and it's sort of like really messed them up. And so I think a lot about that lately, is like, where is that like balance between like mental health and magic, right? Like,
Yeah, I think that's a really delicate one, and ideally, right? I think that and yeah, I think that it really needs to be taken on a case by case basis.
sure,
Right.
of course, I'm not asking for a blanket
Yeah.
answer, just something to think about.
Yeah. And I mean, ideally, I think culturally there would be containers to like help support people who had visions, who heard voices, right? Um, in order to like make sense of this and to create healthy containers for these people to develop whatever protocols were necessary to be able to use these things as the gifts that they are, right? And to really support them in their journeys. In, North America and late stage capitalism, like, we don't have a lot of those structures. Or like, I have not found a lot of those structures. And so I think a lot of it is figuring out how to help support people live their best lives, right? And what that looks like. Because, if manic episodes can feel really awesome, right? But if you spend all of your money and then come down and like you've bought 3 cars and now you're broke and you can't pay your rent, like, that can be a problem, right? And there can be some serious repercussions to that. And so trying to figure out how to support people into utilizing their gifts and channeling them in the most helpful ways without creating negative consequences, or like destabilizing their relationship or their kind of long-term goals and trajectories.
Yeah, well stated. I know it's a tricky one, and it's something I want to make sure that when I was stating it, I wasn't coming across that like I had by any means the answers to these clients. But I do think sometimes it's interesting when you're looking at somebody and you go, you have this, this, and this. But wait, does that mean me too?
Right, right. And I think that like the kind of coach slash astrologer tarot reader, that is like that position feels really comfortable for me because I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't like I'm not dealing with diagnosis, I'm
Hmm.
not dealing with medication. Like if you tell me you hear voices, like that's fine. That's not like that's beyond the scope of my practice in
Hmm.
that capacity. And like we're just here talking about like what the cards say, right?
Yeah.
Um and I think that can be really helpful, and also like non-pathologizing for people, non-judgmental for people. I think they're like, for me, I've always found an accessibility in tarot readers and astrologers and psychics, that I can just go to them, see them. I don't need insurance, they're not going to judge me, right? In the like more therapeutic realm, then like we're looking at kind of a longer term trajectory of care,
Yeah.
right? Which is one of the reasons that I really wanted to get into that profession, because it was uh, hard for me to like see somebody for 90 minutes, look through their astrology chart, get to sort of some core issues, and then it's like, okay, time's up. Good luck to you, you know. And so I think with therapy and like the thinking about longer term trajectory of care, it's really like helping work with the client to figure out what their goals are and what like they would like to achieve, and supporting them in that over months or even years, which I think is great to have that type of relationship with somebody.
Absolutely. Now, for a moment, if we can jump back,
Hmm.
because from what I understand, as you mentioned, your mother was a therapist,
Hmm.
but you spent like a big chunk of your life maybe not wanting to be a therapist, right? Like maybe
Yeah.
going to the other extreme. So can we like talk a little bit about like your sort of evolution until this point? Right? Like what came first? Was it magic? Was it tarot? Like where's the entrance if you trace the thread back to everything that's happening now?
Oh, I think it started with drugs and alcohol. Right? And like copious amounts of LSD when I was young. Um, and I think that kind of trajectory led me here because at a certain point, and it was, I think, around the time that either Saturn or Pluto was crossing my ascendant,
Yeah.
like the wheels totally came off, and I needed to stop drinking and doing drugs, and I needed to go into recovery. And that kind of moment like was a huge transition and shift in my life, because up until that point I was like, I want to be a famous artist, right? And everything that I was doing was like geared towards being a famous artist, and also like traveling around the country, like just partying, living my best life, my best Jupiterian life, which was great. But at a certain point, it all caught up to me, and I was like, oh my God, I'm like, I have trapped myself. I'm like in the throes of addiction, and basically like everything that I ever wanted to do is about to go up in smoke, unless I stop right now. And I really need help. So I got help and quit drinking, quit doing opiates and drugs. Um, and then like at that point, I was like, okay, like if my whole persona,
Hmm.
right, was built around like being an artist, which that I think a lot was a lot built around I want a job where I can just drink all day. um, and I mean, I like say that kind of in a cavalier way. I really loved making art, and I loved having an art practice, but um I think that like I had this whole persona built up around that.
Yeah.
And when I quit, I was like, oh my God, like without this, without drugs, without alcohol, without partying, without being like the crazy dude at the party, without, being an artist, who am I? What am I? And I was like, I want to be a wizard. And so that's what I did.
I think you told a story somewhere. I don't know if it was in a conversation we had or some podcast I was listening to, that when you left New York because you were getting sober and you were staying with your mother outside Boston or in Boston. Am I getting this right?
Mhm.
Boston. And it's like you found like a I don't know, like the occult bookstore, and you got like a book on magic, right? It feels like this was a pivotal part of the story too.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for reminding me. It's been a while. So yeah, when I got sober, I called the only person who I knew who didn't drink. I was living in New York City at the time, and I called this one person who I knew from high school, who was in recovery, and I was like, "Yo, I'm done. I need help." And they were like, "Oh my God, I've been waiting for this call for like 10 years." And they were like, "I will drop what I'm doing and I'll help you." And so I went back to Boston, and stayed at my mom's house, and this person, bless them, came and stayed with me and like fed me water and like, soup for the first like week, and they took me to AA meetings. But in that sort of in this moment of me like DTing and detoxing and sort of like getting digested through this transformation piece, I was like, oh my God, like, what do I do with myself? Right. And I was like, oh yeah, there's this wizard bookstore in Central Square called Seven Stars. And
Yeah.
I love this place. Every time I go back, I'm like, I'm not going to go in. And then I go in and I drop like $150. But so I went there and I just sort of like wandered around, like all like sweaty and shaky, and like found some books and bought them and like started reading them, and it totally like opened this pathway. Because like here's the thing, I was like, I think the real core of it was, I was like, okay, I have like been self-medicating for the past 20 years, right? I do not know what to do with my like sensitivity, right?
Mhm.
Like with the like feeling of being alive, with the like feelings of empathy that I get, with the overwhelm of emotions, like how am I ever going to do this without alcohol? And then I was like, wait a second, I'm sure some other motherfucker has had to deal with this at some point. Right. And I'm sure somebody's come up with ways of like managing this. And then I
Yeah.
was like, oh yeah, like meditation, magic. Okay, like maybe I should go check that out. And so that like brought me to the bookstore, got me these books. Then I got a tarot deck, and like bada bing, bada boom, here I am.
Okay, but do you remember any of those books? And what was your first tarot deck that you picked up then?
I do remember. Hold on. It is the one that, hold on. The one that stuck out the most was the complete book of spells, ceremonies, and magic by Marianne Gonzalez Whippler.
Okay.
Yeah,
For those
all of
watching the video, there is
yeah,
a
all
lovely
of our
purple book.
yeah, all of our listeners out there. And so this is kind of just like a compendium of everything. It's like it's got a little on astrology, a little on tarot, a little on sigils, a little on like this, that,
Yeah.
necromancy. It's not a deep dive into any of these things, but it just like introduces them in a really accessible way. And I was like, okay, cool. Like I can get down with that, And so that I read it cover to cover and like underlined a bunch. And that like kind of gave me an entry, like a taste for things. And like one of the things it suggested was like get a tarot deck. And so I did.
What tarot?
And the first one that I got was a Rider-Waite Smith deck.
Okay.
And that I like, this is before I got sober. I picked one up because like this was already like starting to bubble up, right?
Okay.
This desire. And I think, again, like this is a period of my life where I think Pluto was crossing my ascendant, or Saturn was crossing my ascendant, or both of them. I don't know. And so, right, like when we get these big transits to these sensitive points, right, like things start to change, right? And that change usually happens under the surface, right? Especially if it's a Pluto transit, right? It's happening like very deep under the surface, and things are bubbling up, and things are like, we're getting ideas and sort of directions that we might not notice. And then external events tend to happen that like crack everything open, and like all of that like magma that's been like happening under the surface is sort of released. And that was my experience. But before I'd gotten sober, I had started working on a series of works about like magic, in a kind of like comical like D&D type of way.
Artworks, you mean? I mean, this is
Yeah.
You're still an artist. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you're still an artist now, but at that point in your life, career artist.
Yeah. And so I was like gathering like magical materia.
Yeah.
So I got a bunch of books by Aleister Crowley, and I like got this tarot deck at Catland Books in Bushwick,
Yeah.
which I remember like I got it, and then it like the next day I'm walking around and I had it in my pocket and I was just like caught in a rainstorm and like the deck just got soaked and the like box just like melted off of it. I
Yeah.
was like, oh no. And I called my friend Harmony, who is like,
Yeah.
has been kind of like my witch mentor since I was like young, you know, and has always read my cards since I was
Yeah.
like, a 13-year-old. And I was like, oh my God, Harmony, like my cards got wet. Like, what do I do? And the box melted off. Like, is that bad? Right. And Harmony was like, nah, just throw the boxes away as soon as I get the cards because like whatever. And like maybe they just need to get cleaned off. And I was like, oh, okay. And like in those early days, right? It's like
Yeah.
very like vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
Of magic being like, oh my God, I think I did this thing wrong. And like, is it gonna like ruin everything? Right. Did I like ruin the spell? Which
And that's interesting because at that point you weren't even like, if I'm understanding correctly, it was like magic, but it was under the guise of an art project.
yeah.
So it wasn't like completely, I mean, in earnest, if that makes sense. Like you weren't, if I'm getting this right.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it was like that like curiosity phase.
Yeah.
Right. Where like the only way that I could like really legitimize it in the like my cynical hater kind of New York dress all in black art world persona was to like do it as a art project and a joke. Right. Which it's funny, like if you tell a joke long enough, it becomes true. Right. If you tell a story long enough, it becomes true, right? That's magic right there, right? It's also therapy because in therapy we are telling stories, right? And we're coming to therapy because we have these stories that we tell over and over and over again, right? And so like a lot of magic is like, what's a different story we could tell, right?
It's like spells. Like we're kind of putting ourselves into these trance with these stories. But it's interesting because you didn't have the gift of a therapist to help you work through these stories. You had to be like sort of cracked open, as you said. Do you remember the moment when you were like, I'm getting sober?
Oh yeah. Definitely. It's burned in my brain. I was do you want to hear it or do you
unless you don't want to share it, definitely.
No, it's fine. Just like trigger warning, like there like it there are like definitely like some suicidal thoughts like mixed in with that, but I was on my way to work one day. I was working in Sunset Park in Brooklyn and I was transferring to the N train from like I don't know the G or some train transferring to the N, and I was like waiting on the platform and I was like, oh my God, like I cannot stop drinking. Like I was drunk already. It was like, 9 a.m. and I had like, a beer and like 3 shots of tequila to like get myself to work. It wasn't like I was a binge drinker, right? Like, and I would go on like rampages because I couldn't stop when I started. And so I would just like keep drinking until like my body shut down and I had to sleep for 3 days. And like I was kind of in the throes of that, and like I was also getting addicted to opiates at the time. So I was like had like the beginnings of a heroin addiction. It was like not the best time of my life, and I like found myself on the platform waiting for the train, and I was like, oh my God. Like, I can't stop drinking. Every time I drink, I want to go and score heroin because alcohol's not doing it for me anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, and like, if I keep doing this, I'm going to be a full blown junkie. And this is like right when fentanyl was starting to hit. And like people, like I knew people who were dying and I was like, this is not, I saw this like pathway and I was like, this is not the pathway that I want to go down, but I can't change. Like I felt so trapped in it. And I was like, there is no hope. And like everything that I wanted to do with my life is just like evaporating before me and I can't change and I'm powerless. And this is horrible and miserable and like blah, 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 shame spiral. And I was like, I should just like end it all right here, And then I was like, wait a second, I do know that one person who's sober and like, I don't know, maybe they could help me. And I was like, well, I can call them, and and try to like go to AA or like try and get recovery. And if that doesn't work, I can always jump in front of a train later. Right. And so that's the choice that I made. And I'm really grateful for that, because that kind of opened all these possibilities, instead of like just closing down all the possibilities.
You mentioned that you were drinking because it was sort of the only thing that could mask your sensitivities, right? And eventually you sort of, I don't want to say, used magic for the same purposes, if I'm understanding. What were those sensitivities, right? And how does magic sort of act as the balm to keep you in check now, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think when I was younger, I just like had, I don't know, like increased empathy. I don't know. I don't even know if it's increased. I don't know if it's normal, but
Yeah.
I would walk down the street and like look at people and be like, oh my God, I want to cry. Right. For like some reason, I just like looked at somebody's face and it like made me want to cry. And I'm like, that's that's too much. Like I cannot, I just felt like so kind of like exposed all of the time,
Mhm.
and I think that alcohol like really helped to like dumb that down, which I think is one of its benefits, right? I think that alcohol has like a lot of magical qualities and properties. I've just like lost my privileges with it.
Yeah.
And I think that it like helped to protect me for a
Mhm.
long time, but like it got old, and instead of like protecting me, it was just like keeping me from living life. And so magic has given me like, I think meditation has like really helped me to kind of be with the feelings that I'm having, and
Yeah.
like instead of being swept away by them, I'm able to just acknowledge them, right? And know like this is a feeling and this will move through me, right? And I think that having magical practices has helped me to connect more with a living universe, right? And the animate world around me, right? And to form relationships with it, right? Because
Yeah.
Here's one of the things. Addiction, in my experience, like really cut me off from my connection with myself, with the universe, with life, with other people. And I think magic is all about that connection, right? It's like putting us in connection with the living universe, with the planets, with the earth, with the plants, with inanimate objects, with all of these things. And so, like, I think to answer your question, magic has really like helped me to understand the web of life that I'm held in, and to be an active participant in that instead of somebody who is just falling and struggling through it, you know?
Do you think magic has maybe given you an outlet to work with those, like that sensitivity, to see it as a skill? Because I think I'm like, wow, that sensitivity is probably what makes you a really great therapist, what makes you a good artist, as opposed to sort of the just like cut it off approach that maybe drugs and alcohol provided.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I also want to name that, like, I don't think our culture, or my culture,
Yeah.
right, really like appreciates people's psychic sensibilities, right? I think that everybody has like their own kind of like psychic abilities, right? And sensitivities, and their places that they like feel connected to the unseen world.
Yeah.
And very rarely is this cultivated. Also, emotional intelligence is very rarely cultivated. It's not like people don't have access to it. It's not taught in school, right? It's been a challenge to understand what I'm feeling, because no one has ever been like, hey, like, this is the like spectrum of feelings that one could have. Let's name these and like really tune into like where we feel that in the body. Like no one has ever taught me any of that. And for me, my experience was like, if this is a feeling, it's way too much. I need to shut it down right fucking now. Right. And now I'm like, I've learned a lot of tools, right? And those tools have come through like AA and recovery, right? And that's my path. And I'm not saying that like anybody else needs to follow that, but that's really worked for me. And it's also come through like studying the tarot. It's come through studying magic. It's come through like talking to other people who have more knowledge and wisdom. It's come through talking to other people who have like similar experiences to me, right? And so I've like sort of had to piece it together in a way that works for me, and that's also kind of my nature as like a fiercely Sagittarian person.
You're Sagittarius rising, yeah?
No, I have a Scorpio rising, which which is the resting witch face. And also that makes me a good counselor, right? Because it's like, oh, there's like a mystery here, like, right, let's dig deep, let's get to the like heart of the thing, right?
Because if I'm getting this correct, because you're an astrologer now, but I think the whole you started off as a tarot reader, right? That was had a profound effect on you. And I was thinking about do you know Cameron Steele? She's a writer and a magician and a tarot reader. She's wonderful. You should check her out if you don't know her.
I don't.
But she's currently in year 3 of Austin's class.
Okay.
Anyway, she's wonderful. But we had a conversation. She was saying how, one of the ways maybe even the way that she got over a drinking problem, eating addiction, right? Sort of like major shift in life was like accidentally finding a tarot deck. And somehow the tarot, was powerful enough, I think, and if I'm getting this right, to let her see her story in a different way, but also to be able to understand maybe this sort of psychic ability, right? Because it's kind of crazy. You can go, oh, wait, I'm having feelings, but then suddenly my tarot is attesting to this. Mm-hmm. Do you think that in some way, like that the tarot allows you to see your story differently and allows you to have maybe an outlet for some of those, we could say, psychic inclinations or abilities?
Yeah, definitely. And thanks for bringing that up. And send me that person's Instagram when we're done, please.
I will. I have a interview with her. Everyone can check it out. It's a podcast. Great. The written interview is wonderful because it's mostly her writing. I'll share it afterwards.
Great.
And the show notes too.
So yeah, to answer your question, one of the storytelling, right? Yeah. That the tarot provided was incredibly helpful. And the way that I experienced that would be like pulling a card and seeing like, okay, like this is how this archetype shows up in a skillful way. And it's like, highest possible form. And this is how it shows up unskillfully, right? So, I don't know, 7 of Wands, right, comes up, right? And that's card with, a dude on a hill or a person on a hill sort of fighting 6 sticks that are pointing up from below. And it's like, okay, if that card came up, I would pull a card every day. That card came up and it'd be like, okay, cool. I'd read through the thing and be like, okay, I have the like high ground. I have the advantage. There's like action. There's like stuff happening. It's time to like, fight for what I need. But like the unskillful way that card can show up is being like, I can only function in a crisis, right? Waiting to the last minute when like everything's like chaotic and being like, cool, like now it's time to like pound 3 Red Bull and like work all night, And so like just seeing how these kind of archetypes were alive in me and being like, oh, what is the best possible way that I can show up for this, right? Or like how is this maybe showing up in an unhelpful or unskillful way for me? And so it gave me kind of like a spectrum of behaviors, right? Yeah. That I could lean into and understand. And it kind of has this amazing way of like pulling, right? Because we are these like nebulous fields of like thoughts, emotions, digestion, like bacteria. Like we're just these like weird clouds of stuff moving around, right? And what the tarot did for me was it was like, okay, this is one thing to think about. And I could like zoom in on that and be like, okay, like this one thing, how do I do that in a way that can be beneficial? And so that like brought a lot of clarity for me.
And I feel maybe a theme of your life is just doing everything to the max. Because if I'm remembering correctly, right? And I don't know the timeline of this, but I believe there was like maybe a year of your life where you were like living in a van and just like obsessing over these tarot videos. Am I getting something right here?
Yeah, it was about 2 years. Yeah, that was my exit strategy from New York. And like it's funny that you bring that up because I think my poor old van has just had its last ride. I think the transmission just went out like 2 days ago. So I'm sort of in a grieving process and looking for a new car at the moment. But you know, not to like begin at I guess I'm beginning at the end. Like now I get to like move into like this next phase of my life because I bought this van. Like I was in New York, I'd lost my studio. I was like living in Red Hook in Brooklyn. I'd lost my studio. I was just sort of like working at a fabrication shop to like get money to pay my rent to stay in New York. And I was like, what am I doing here? And I was like, oh my God, I want to be a wizard living in the desert, making my living off of wizardry look so bad. I could like feel it, right? And I like remember like standing at my altar in my like apartment, like being like, oh my God, I just like want this vision so bad right now. And that's not like you don't get it immediately, right? And I'm really grateful that I didn't because I did not have the capacity to like handle it at that moment, you know. But I ended up buying a van and living in it and driving around the country for like 2 years, trying to like figure out the right course of action for me. And in that time, I had like a daily and then weekly Instagram practice where I'd pull a card and then make videos about it, which became my kind of creative outlet.
I feel like you're not doing these videos justice. Can you, for those who've never experienced these, can you provide a better description, please?
So I would pull a card and then sort of like I would write about it, you know, whatever the like sort of max Instagram character limit. I guess like for the when I was doing it daily and I went through the entire deck, I had these rules for myself. I would not spend more than 1 hour making a 1 minute video, and my description of it had to fit in the one like in the comment, not the comment, in the whatever the thing is that isn't the comment, the writing, you know, it had to fit in like that section. It had to be the Instagram character limit. And then I'd have the card and I would sort of like interact with it through like the video and sort of embody it and try and explain this card in 1 minute or less by like creating all of these characters, a lot of them with googly eyes, and trying to embody like the energy of the card, which is a great way for me to understand the deck.
Do you remember when you posted your last like video and where the transition was? Like, was there a certain sort of retirement that happened after that?
Yeah, I mean, what ended up happening was I went to grad school and it just like took up a bunch of my time. And like for a while, I mean, and I still want to be making these videos. It's just like it's hard to get into that space and to have that uninterrupted time to be like writing and recording. And then like the other thing that happened was I would make a video and post it and like 60 people would like it, you know, and I'm like, damn, like, you know, I spent a lot of time on this, like that like hurts, you know, or like 30 people would like it, you know. And then recently I just went back to California for the first time in like 4 years, and like all these people that I saw, including like distant family members, were like, oh my God, will you keep making those videos? I love them. And getting that like actual personal feedback, which like is not encapsulated by like just heart, was really helpful. And so I'm trying to get back in the practice of doing it. I've started doing a This Week in Space series that was prompted by me becoming an advisor on the AstroStar app, which is a great app, and I highly recommend downloading it because there's great astrology talks and content up there. But I became an advisor on that, and I was like, oh, cool, I'll start doing content. And so I started making videos for that, which are a little longer format. But again, like grad school takes up a ton of time. So I'm still trying to figure out how I can engage in that creative practice and also do all the stuff that I need to do for graduate school.
Which gets us to the current moment. But before we go there, because I know that we're heading up in time, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you how you got into astrology, because I also think it's a really great story. Yeah, you're kind of thrown into it if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes. And I just want to say that like everything that I've done in my life, I think I have just like been thrown into the deep end and been like, cool, I'm going to figure out how to swim. Like just going to a foreign country and being like, okay, I guess I just live here now and like I'll figure it out.
Where were you living? What foreign country?
Oh, that was, that's another story for another time.
Can we just drop the country though? I'm curious.
I lived in Amsterdam. I lived in Thailand. Those are the two countries that I've spent the most amount of time in.
Okay. It's part two down the road. But so astrology.
Yeah. So the way that I got into astrology, and mind you, I was always like, I can't do it. I'm not going to do astrology because it's too much math, which like actually isn't true if you have computer programs, because it takes a lot of the math out. And if there weren't computer programs, I don't know if I would have gotten into it. But the way that I got into it, well, one, when I was like in the beginning phases, I would like listen to like YouTube videos. Okay. And I started with Kaipacha and his Pele report.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. Which
that guy.
Yeah, that guy. And I have to say, okay, I have a weekly radio show, which is an astrology themed radio show, which is called the Melee Report, which is a takeoff of Kaipacha's Pele Report, because like this dude, I view him as my nemesis, right? Where I think that I think sometimes excuse me, he drops some like really helpful and insightful knowledge and wisdom, but like he is also a caricature of like the dumbest hippie that I've ever met. And like it's like I have such a like complex relationship where I'm like, oh, I want to be living that life, right? Traveling the world. He's always like, namaste, I'm in Switzerland. Namaste, I'm in Costa Rica. Namaste, I'm in like this other like amazing place. Like doing this conference, doing like these things. And I'm like, damn, that's the life that I want to have. And like this like hippie like dude is doing it. And so it was like a pretty complex feeling. So anyway, I was listening to that and I was like, wow, this is interesting. I like starting to learn about it. I like never really picked it up, and ended up in my travels being in Nevada City and California, and the kind of local tarot person there was this person, Amalia, who when I came into town, I was like, oh, they're the tarot reader here. I want to like, meet them. They're friends with my friends. And so we ended up trading readings. They gave me an astrology reading. I gave them a tarot reading. Okay. And at the end of those readings, we were like best friends, and we like talked for multiple hours, and they were like, oh my God, I've got to get you into this Stephen Forrest like AP program that I do. And I was like, I have no idea who that is. And or even what that means. And they're like, don't worry, I'm going to get you in, just like if you have like whatever $400 for the weekend training, like, or a weekend thing, like, just come do it, like, we'll go together, it'll be great. And they got me in, and I went, and I was like, I fucking do not know what I'm doing here. I felt so uncomfortable. Like, I did not, like, they gave me a tag with my like sun, moon, and rising. Like, I didn't know my rising sign. I knew where my moon was, but and I like did not know the glyphs at this point. I didn't know anything. And this was a 2-day workshop or 3-day workshop on the nodes of the moon. And like, and I was just like, I have no idea what's going on here, and I feel so self-conscious. But Amalia, bless them, like helped me, held my hand through it, like explained things to me. And like there's a great community in the Stephen Forrest AP programs that like also really helped me to understand. And that's how I sort of like got into it. And then on the way back, I was like, yo, Amalia, I would love it if you would do like a weekly podcast with the kind of astro weather, or monthly podcast with the astro weather. Because Amalia is a great astrologer and maybe like one of my best teachers, and their work is fucking top notch. They are brilliant. And I was like, yo, will you please do this? And they're like, I'll only do it if you do it with me. And I was like, okay. And then so we started a podcast called the Stallion and the Hare, and we did it for every new moon and full moon for like 2 years. And so like every 2 weeks I was like, okay, I have to learn about what's going on in space and then figure out what it all means. And then like motherfuckers just started booking readings with me, and I was like, okay, now I'm just like teaching myself astrology. I bought a bunch of books and like started teaching myself astrology.
I love that story so much. Like you went, and also I think I've heard a version of this story, but the way I want to go back, you tell it so well, is like describing sort of Stephen Forrest just sort of like emanating knowledge, because this was in person, I think, for people who are now sort of in Zoom world. What was that? Just for a moment, what was that experience like?
Yeah, so the like AP classes were really interesting, and Stephen would run groups in he had one in China, one in Australia, one in North Carolina, and this one was he had one in Northern California, and this was the Southern California one. And so it was like 3 days of Stephen like sitting on a little stage in a like comfy chair and just talking. And he would just like talk, and this dude like just channeled information. And I think that there is something about like being with somebody, being with a teacher, where there's like a transmission, and like that transmission was like pretty intense, because this is also like a bunch of really magical people. There's like a kind of like a magic school that was also kind of associated with this, and there was like a lot of energy that's happening. And I remember I went to one, I think I went to 3 in total, and I got certified as like level 1 Stephen Forrest wizard. And then the COVID happened, and it all sort of dissolved, and now it's moved online. But there was one that was all about Saturn and Jupiter, and like the energy in that like room was like really intense, just like people thinking about their own lives and like a lot of processing going on. And I ended up getting like really sick during like afterwards, because I was just like kind of like sitting in this energy for so long. And also like every time I went, I just sort of leveled up, because you're just like immersed in all of this kind of psychic energy, all of this astro energy, all of this magic energy, which can be a lot.
It's interesting because we think of Stephen Forrest, right? Modern astrologer, evolutionary astrology, EA, right? It sort of dovetails on something I've been thinking about recently. Like modern astrology, maybe there's a more focus on the individual, right? Like, who are you, right? And then because you've also studied Hellenistic astrology, right? And so then opens maybe a worldview, like within Hellenistic astrology, is this idea that my chart's not me. My chart is like my entrance where I'm sort of tied to the cosmos, and all these other people are like connected to me, and I just can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that for you, as someone who is coming at like, coming through recovery and finding yourself for the first time, it seems interesting that you would find modern astrology of like, okay, like, who am I? And then as you got like farther and farther along your path, then you would be able to sort of make space for the Hellenistic worldview of like, okay, now I can handle the other people in the world.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's a really interesting take on it. And I think about this, I think about this a lot because I'm like constantly like in the study and compulsively buying books. And, I think one of the things that's been a challenge for me is that like, I haven't like since the AP ended, Stephen's AP program ended, I haven't really had a teacher. Right. And I'm kind of self-taught, and I've taken a lot of classes with Jason Hawley, but I haven't, and I've taken a lot of astrology classes, but I haven't really had like a teacher, right? Like you're in Austin's class and it's like, okay, cool. Like we're doing it this way.
Yeah.
And I'm just sort of like picking things up. And so now I'm reading like this Ben Dykes' 700-page translation of Abu Mashar's, on the solar returns and the nativity. And I'm like, okay, cool. This is interesting, right? These techniques are interesting, but I don't have like the kind of framework to like somebody being like, this is how we do it. Right. So I'm like kind of putting these things together, but I think that, also the psychological astrology has a lot to offer, right? And I'm trying to like put together a framework that works well for me, because I do like the EA, like evolutionary astrology. I like, past life ideas, right? I like the idea that we are always kind of like Stephen Forrest is like, where there's a planet, there's a problem, right? Like this is something that we're working on, right? It's not like I am a Sagittarian sun. It's like I am learning how to like in this life, in this incarnation, how to like have a Sagittarian worldview, right? And to like develop an identity as a Sagittarius in a skillful way, which is like helpful to me. But I think that there's a lot of the like Hellenistic stuff I started learning for magic because like the modern astrology has kind of like got like everything is equal in modern astrology in a way, right? There's not the same kind of levels of like this planet's doing well here, this planet's struggling here, this is in its detriment, what's going on with like all of these like dignities, which is really important for electional and magic. And I think it's also one of the things that's been helpful for me is to remember that astrology is not just about an individual's horoscope, right? There's all these other things that we can do with it as well, which kind of opened the field up and like became really exciting for me.
Okay, total non sequitur here, but where does the idea of the field come from? Like everyone talks about that, and I just did like a 7-day retreat with Jason Hawley, and we're in the field. You're a therapist, you're in school. Where's this idea? I feel like this is probably from some specific school that no one's telling me where this is coming from.
That is, I don't. Okay, so, yeah, I would need to. I think it's like field theory. I would need to look it up. I don't know it off the top of my head.
I hope you just made that up because that'd be so good.
No, that sounds right. But so basically, I think this is an excellent question, right? Because like that's straight up magic. The field, right?
Yeah.
The field is magic. And that's like the space that's opened, right? Between like the group, right? If you're doing a group, or like between an individual, right? Me and you sitting here having this conversation, even through Zoom, there is a field that is open, right? And
Yeah.
there's all this stuff that comes into that, right? That is more than just our words, right? It is sort of what's happening in my body, what's happening in your body, what's happening with our like kind of somatic movements, what's happening in the unspoken language. And I think as a counselor, it is important that we're like sensitive to the field. And I say counselor not as like licensed professional mental health counselor,
Yeah.
but as like, you know, anyone in a helping profession, right? And like what happens when we open the field and anything that comes into the field is
Yeah.
like part of like what we're doing here. And, you know, as a tarot reader, I was taught that like once you like open the deck, anything that happens is like part of the reading, right? If three birds go by, that's like in the reading, right? If a car backfires and like you get scared, that's part of the reading, right? Anything that happens when we open this field becomes part of that work.
I'm going to bring this full circle, I promise, because I know we're running out of time. Like learning to work with the field, understanding there is a field that you can either engage in or disengage, open and close. Did you find that was a way maybe to like make a barrier or protect your sensitivities, right? Like, do you still, like right now, like if you're walking down the street and you see someone and you get compulsion to like feel sad, right? Like, how do you handle that now as opposed to the person who would just start drinking?
That's a great question. I think that part of magic is a lot about like hygiene,
Yeah.
right? Cleanliness, right? How we like hold space, you know, how the protections that we use. I mean, I I carry like, you know, at least 8 magical objects on me at all times, right? Like I have an ancestor practice where
Yeah.
like I do a lot of work with them and like I feel that they like really protect me. So I've like done a lot of work around like creating my own personal protections and like you know, when I'm like in session with people, I'm like holding stones and like not to like protect me, but to like discharge my energy,
Yeah.
right? And to like help me to ground. And so like these are all practices that I've developed to kind of like help me navigate. And also, you know, in doing a lot of personal work through my own therapy, through my counseling program, through like my astrological study, whatever, like, you know, all these pathways that I've taken. I've gotten a lot of better at having like energetic boundaries, personal boundaries, right? And recognizing like, hey, this isn't mine, right? I see a person who is like, you know, walking down the street and I imagine that they are suffering, right? Which
Yeah.
that's also really important because it's like I have a sensation that I'm telling a story around, right? And like it is an imagination or a projection that I'm projecting on this person, right? And it's like my initial impulse is like I should help them, right? And then what I do is be like this isn't mine, right? And I think for me as like a very like sensitive person, or what I imagine to be a very sensitive person, I don't even know because I have nothing to compare it to. This is totally subjective. What's been really important for me is to like recognize what my limits are, you know, what my sphere is, and
Yeah.
to not like lean outside of that. Because my sponsor, who is a brilliant human being, was like, yo, if you see somebody who's out of alignment and you come out of alignment to help them, then you just have 2 out of aligned people, right? And like I can't really do anything for anybody else unless I'm in good alignment. So a lot of my work is around me maintaining that, which as a person who does things to the max is like pretty difficult. And it's really hard for me to dial it back to be in alignment because I'm like, oh, I want to do this and this and this. Right. And like, oh, this other project that I can just jump in like beyond my abilities and just figure it out. Let's go. Buy me a ticket to Greece.
What are you doing in Greece?
I'm doing a dream symposium and residency. Yeah, called the Dream Palace. And that's with this woman, Sarah Janes, who is published by Inner Traditions,
Okay.
and a bunch of other people. I think Al Cummins is supposed to go. Quintron is performing. There's a bunch of like speakers and musicians and different kind of groups that are happening in Athens in October.
Okay, amazing. So this is a good segue to like, is this like open to, are you speaking? Is this open to the public? Is this a retreat? What's happening?
It's open to the public. You can get tickets at the Dream Palace Athens. I think I can send you a link if you're interested, or if any of the
This October.
This October.
Oh man, such short notice.
I know, that's one of the problems.
But if people are interested,
yeah, I think that they're going to be doing this. They're going to try and do it yearly. But they reached out to me and were like, "Hey, do you want to help, like, hold space for the people who are dreaming and like help people process their dreams and work through things?" And so, as part of that, I gave a talk about dream mapping with Sarah Janes, and like how dreams are connected to the body and the somatic sensations. And also, I've started doing some research into the astrology of dreaming and using astrology to interpret dreams. And so I've like Demetra George has an excellent lecture on it called Gates of Horn, Gates of Bone. It's on the Ninth House, and talks about Demetria goes through Benatti's technique of dream interpretation. So I'm using that as like a framework and kind of starting to interpret people's dreams through astrology charts. And so I'm kind of working on doing case studies for that.
Oh man. Okay. So how can people, will you send me links to all those things after so I can put them in the show notes? That's fantastic. And I was thinking about you, as I mentioned, I was just like in this like retreat that I didn't tell anybody I was going to with Jason Holly. And like, it was so wild. Like I was with people, like 16 people for like 7 days, day and night, right? We like started to like dream together. It was very wild and exciting, but you're hip to all of this.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that because, I really like Jason's work. I'm actually doing a workshop, a psychodrama thing with him on Sunday.
Wow, you went all the way. And this is maybe the last thing is you were studying at the university that he used to teach at, right? So you kind of like followed him out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was like living in West Texas, and I was like, I need to like do like I need to change something. Needs to change. And I got a reading, like I followed his work. I saw him give a lecture at NORWAC, and I was like, I think on Mars and Mars's rulerships.
Okay.
I was like, whoa, this is really cool. And I got in touch with him, got a reading, and asked him some questions. Well, I think I like saw that he was a therapist and an astrologer, and I was like, how do you do that? Right. And I kind of like looked at his educational background, saw that he went to Southwestern College, and was like, oh, that's cool. And so I got a reading with him and was like, what do you think about the program? What do I do with my life? Right. Hey, Mr. Magic Man with like the wisdom, who knows the stars, what do I do with my life? And he kind of like helped me talk through some things. And I was like, cool. Like, I think I'm going to apply to school. Also, I want to say that this was right around the time of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And Stephen Forrest was like, with this conjunction, think about what is the like hardest thing that you can do that will like give you the most benefit, right? What is the mountain with the gold on top? And so for me, it was like, applying to graduate school is like definitely the hardest thing that I could do right now. That would probably have like the biggest kind of benefits at the end. But anyway, I ended up applying, I got in, I went, and then as soon as I got there, Jason left, which, is sort of the story of my life, because like part of me is like, oh my God, I just want a teacher to like tell me what to do. But my deep knowing is like, that's not my path. My path is to like figure it out for my damn self because I hate authority, right? And like I really do want like a mentor, but like I think it's like really the kind of path that I've taken in this incarnation is to like figure it out for myself and maybe like to teach others sometime down the line. Who knows? We'll see where that goes.
If I may, may I reference your chart for a moment?
Yeah, sure.
Don't you have like a moon Chiron situation that's pretty close?
Yes, which like might be that like my mom's a therapist, right? And me being like, that no way, I'm not doing that. And then like coming back around when I quit drinking, right? Which is like a very Chiron experience for me. Being like, okay, I guess so. Fine.
By the way, at the beginning you said you were under the weather. I feel like you have been on your A++ game.
Oh,
thank you. Podcast. Yeah, you're
Thank
welcome.
you.
So if people listen to this, how can they learn? How can they book with you? How can they learn more about you, study with you? What are all the things, the ways to engage?
Okay. What are the ways to engage? So I'm on Instagram at Blind Stallion Space Wizard. I like to post videos about space and sometimes the tarot when I have enough time. And hopefully that'll be a somewhat regular practice. And you can always DM me there. I have a website, which is campwizardcamp.com, which is a great way to get in touch with me. I prefer if people don't book through that because it's kind of annoying, but just like message me, send me a contact form or, DM me. I do a weekly astrology themed radio show, which is on SoundCloud and an internet radio station called Spaz Radio. That comes out Fridays for people on Patreon and on Spaz Radio. And then Saturdays, I like open it to the public. But it's called the Melee Report. And basically, it is the astro weather of the week set to music. And I find excellent music that helps to describe the vibe in space. So, it's all the astro weather you never thought you needed, set to all the music you never thought you would hear. It's sort of how I bill it. And that's a lot of fun. So check that out. And you can find that on SoundCloud at Camp Wizard Camp. I get a Patreon, Camp Wizard Camp, where you can get the radio show, track listings. I don't know, I do other stuff up there. And then I just started doing I'm an advisor on this new astrology app called AstroStar. And that you can book readings with me through. I think my reading days are going to be Wednesdays, but I'm still figuring it out with school. And I think I'm going to start doing a Monday morning astro weather report at 11 a.m. Mountain time, which would be 1 p.m. Eastern time and 10 a.m. Pacific time. But that'll be like a live stream every Monday where I'm just telling you what's going on. Your little like astro weather report to get you started off on the week. And yeah, so I think that's the stuff that I do. Oh, I also am a guest host for the full moon episodes of the Inspired Astrology podcast, which is done by a great astrologer named Lauren K. Hickman out of Wisconsin. So
does she have an accent like that, or did you just throw the accent out?
I just threw it out. So yeah, I think that's like everything that I'm doing. And yeah, if you want to get in touch with me, just like, message me through my website or
Camp Wizard Camp.
Camp Wizard Camp. Or on my Instagram at Blind Stallion Space Wizard, or you can join the Patreon and message me there.
The Patreon, by the way, it's like, I feel like, tell me, but as I remember, it's really inexpensive, and you post consistently. I think you make all the announcements there. I feel like that's the best way. People can afford to buy you a cup of coffee. Join the Patreon.
Yeah, join the Patreon. The radio show is $3 a month, which is like less than $1 an episode, which I tell you what, there is nothing that you can find today for less than $1. Except
it's great. I feel like in another life, you were like a Well, you are a DJ, but I feel like you've probably like been that guy who's like spent his life at like record stores for like ever, because that's what that's what it sounds like when you listen to the Melee report of like, fuck, I don't even, there's some obscure like bin collecting happening in this radio show.
Yeah, it is. That is my like passion project. It is something that I deeply love, and it comes out every single week. And I spend a lot of time doing it because I care. And I tell you what, there is some great music out there that I put together. This week, I'm gonna get some Lil Wayne in there, some Wheezy, because I haven't played that in a while. Yeah, I've been saving up some gems for this Venus opposed Saturn. So tune in. Yeah, and you can find me on Patreon at Camp Wizard Camp, and that's the Wizard Radio tier at just $3.
$3. And if for whatever reason, if you miss an episode, or you can just go back, they're listed there forever. You could literally just spend your whole life devoted to this playlist if you chose to.
Yeah, I'm at episode like 210, I think. So that's a lot of music. Oh, also, I want to tell your listeners that in October, and this has been a tradition throughout the whole radio show, I do for Halloween, I do a total request for the dearly departed Halloween extravaganza, where people can message me ahead of time and let me know if they want to dedicate a song to a loved one who has passed on. And so, I asked for like a little description and what song they want to play. And just like collect a bunch of music from all of my listeners for, all of our ancestors and people who have passed on. And that show just goes, like, usually the show is about an hour and a half long, and this one just goes as long as it needs to. And it's just like deep dedications to the people that we care about who have passed on, because the dead love to dance.
And I'll add to that I submitted a name 1 year, like 2 years ago, and you were kind enough to choose the song because it was a bit daunting. I didn't really have one. So if people are in the same position, they want to honor their dead, maybe they don't know the song, can we say that you will choose for them?
Most definitely. And it's that for me, that feels like a great kind of community service, and like also like a great way of participating with the spirit world while the veil is thin. And just to like, I think it's really important to like honor the people that we care about, even when they've passed on, and maybe even more so when they've passed on. And this is a way that I can contribute to that practice and process, and like provide maybe like catharsis or care and love to our ancestors.
And this year you will be during the thinnest part of the veil, you're going to be in Greece on a dream journey.
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get the show together, but like I'm gonna do it because I love doing it. So anyway, if you're interested, get me your request soon, because I'm about to be on a pretty intense dream journey.
Oh my goodness, this has been so much fun. I think we've covered all the places for people to find you: Camp Wizard Camp on Patreon, the website, and I feel like Patreon links to everything else, right? If we had to choose one?
Let's go to Patreon, because that's a revenue stream.
It's a revenue stream. And they can also reach out to you. They can message, they can join for $3 a month. They get music, they can reach out.
Yeah.
Get announcements.
There's other things, including tarot readings and guided meditations. So check it out. Patreon, Camp Wizard Camp.
I love it. Okay. With that, I think that unless I've missed something.
I'll just put my Instagram handle out there one more time, in case you want to check out my videos. That's Blind Stallion Space Wizard. That is Blind Stallion Space Wizard, underscores in between the words. And also check out the AstroStar app, because straight up, there are some great astrologers up there, including Sam Reynolds, Maurice Fernandez, Cameron Allen. There's like a really good community of people who are like dropping some excellent wisdom and doing a lot of like live videos and stuff. And I am honored to be one of these people. So check it out.
You're honored. I'm not surprised. Okay, I think we've covered all of it, and I know you were kind enough to give me an hour plus of your time. So with that, I'm going to end this recording, and then I'll wish you a good day. Maybe
parents, no other adults, no one to interfere with the fun.